And out of that respect, it's important for us, we feel, to explain why we are signing this Declaration of Independence, why we are settling on this course of action. And so you see in the very short paragraph of the Declaration, it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, nature's God, entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So they begin to explain why they're separating. And we have this, initially, this first large paragraph with the language that many people are familiar with. This is part of their rationale for separating. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights that come from, that you have them, individual rights, simply because you are alive. No other reason you have these natural fundamental rights. They don't come from the government, they are endowed by the Creator. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Remember, these are the underlying essential principles, the essential principles underlying our system of governance, underlying our Constitution. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. The government they were separating from ruled those colonies for 150 years. Long established government. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to all systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. My version of the Declaration of Independence is 5 pages. 3 of those pages are devoted to a listing of the grievances that they had against the government of their day, and they set these out as the facts behind their justifying their decision to separate from that government. We've been petitioning. Those of you who are familiar with our organization know what we've been doing now for 10 years. There are other people who have been petitioning their government for redress of various grievances, but we'll take a look at what we have been doing and what the response has been from the government. We have prepared petitions for redress of grievances having to do, the grievance in every case has been a violation of the Constitution. So we see, we observe, we scrutinize government's behavior. We compare its behavior with the requirements of our Constitution. And where we see an impropriety or a conflict, we unhesitatingly confront it, doing whatever is necessary to bring government back within the boundaries that we have drawn around its power. That's what we do. That's what the We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education does. So let's go back in time to, in each one of these petitions for redress of grievances, there's no historical model to be followed for a petition for redress of grievances. There's no standard. If there ever was a standard, maybe we've set it. We've used constitutional professors, constitutional experts in assisting us in the preparation of these petitions. We treat them as depositions. Each of these petitions for redress of grievances, after a few whereases up front, we then include a series of one-sentence statements of fact preceded by the words admit or deny. So these are a series of statements of fact in question form. We know what the answer is. We have the evidence. We're not entitled to our version of the facts. We're entitled to our legal arguments. We're not entitled to our version of the facts. It's up to the government to refute these facts and offer their own version of the facts. But they have a duty to speak, and if they don't speak, then it's well settled in American jurisprudence that silence is admission. And so we present these facts, which we believe to obviously be true, in one sentence each. So it's admit or deny this, admit or deny this, and so forth. Sometimes 29 questions, sometimes 53, as many as 89 questions are in these petitions for redress of grievances. So they're basically, the remedy we're seeking are answers to certain questions. And the questions fall, all 89 of them, or all 53 of them, fall essentially in two categories. This is what you're doing, statements of fact about what you're doing, and statements of fact about what the Constitution requires. And while we were at it, we decided we'd prepare 3 more petitions for redress of grievances, and we served in total 4 petitions for redress of grievances on every member of Congress on November 8th, 2002, asking them to send a representative over to the National Mall to let us know when they would respond. These are the 4. We decided it was time to petition them for redress of grievances regarding the violation of the money clauses, talking there, of course, by the Federal Reserve System. Clearly unconstitutional, clearly a violation of the money clauses of the Constitution. We also decided to petition for redress of grievances regarding the government's violation of the privacy clause, the so-called privacy clauses of the Constitution. I'm talking there about the Patriot Act, which authorized, among other things, the government to come into your home, copy your hard drive, and leave without ever telling you they were there. And also, at the same time, another petition for redress of grievances regarding the imposition and enforcement of a direct, unapportioned tax on labor, a violation of the taxing clauses of the Constitution. So we contracted, we got a permit to occupy part of the National Mall, a permit from the National Park Service. We contracted with the company that stages most of the main events in Washington, including the fireworks on July 4th. We had speakers, and at 2 o'clock, we asked the crowd to, and these people who were there, many of them caravanned from around the country. I flew to San Francisco and got in a car with a few other people, and we drove to Washington. And a lot of other people joined us along the route. And so there were, I don't know, 1,000 people or so on the National Mall. And at 2 o'clock, we decided to part the crowd to allow the representatives from our Congress, from our members of the House and the Senate, the representatives that we had asked to come and at least let us know when they would respond to the petitions, to make room for them to approach the stage. And we did that, and of course, we had a live webcast. So this entire day's event was webcast, and thousands of people were watching it, and we parted, and nobody from the government came down to let us know. No one came down to provide any kind of a response.